How we doing, college football fans? We are here with another quick video, and the topic that I want to speak on today is the topic on the college football playoffs. More importantly, the conference champions who got the first round bye. This includes teams Arizona State, Oregon, Boise State, and Georgia. And if you are a college football fan, then you already know up to this point that all four of these teams have now been eliminated. Starting off with Boise State, and to be quite frank, I mean, Boise State was not worthy of a playoffs, or sorry, not a playoff spot, but a first round bye, in my opinion. I have been very, very vocal, even in past videos, where I say that Boise State was a fraud to begin with. And Penn State, in a sense, proved my point. I mean, Boise State, their biggest accomplishment this season, or their biggest reason on making the playoffs, was a close loss to Oregon. That was people's way of saying that Boise State deserved to be in the playoffs. And it's just absurd. And Penn State, in a sense, proved that that was absurd. Next up, we got Arizona State. Now, Arizona State is actually the only team that kind of, in a sense, debunks the argument I'm making, and that is because they actually had a close game. If you watched this game, you saw that Arizona State actually did go into overtime with Texas. They ultimately will end up losing this game, and to be kind of fair to Texas, Arizona State was only in this game due to multiple miscues on the Texas team. Their offense became very slow and sluggish in the second half. Their defense was giving up way too many penalties that put Arizona State in prime position to score. And let's be honest, they're missing field goals that they should have made. So Arizona State was only close in this game because they needed so many things to go wrong for Texas. Now, the next team we're going to talk about is probably the only team that people 100% think was fair getting a bye, you know. And I'm not saying it's unfair that any of these other teams got a bye, but I mean the performance that the teams have put in kind of makes you question the format of the playoff bracket. And this is the Oregon Ducks. I mean, the only team that went undefeated that was in the playoffs, the only team that people felt like, oh yeah, this is the team that was 100% going to win going into the playoffs before any games were even played. But obviously, just like every team before them, they fell victim to a blowout loss to Ohio State. And their defense honestly looked terrible. And to be fair, their defense didn't look great the first time they played Ohio State either. But their offense was non existent. Ohio State defensively just controlled practically every facet of the game. They had shut down Oregon's wide receivers, and I understand that they did have injuries within their offense with their running back and their wide receiver, Evan Stewart, being out of the game. But even then, it just felt like this Oregon team just had nothing going for them. And finally, we have Georgia. Georgia is kind of in a different spectrum in terms of the other teams, and that is because they went into this game without their starting quarterback. However, this is not an excuse in my eyes. To be honest, Georgia as a team has been very, very disappointing. They had very poor quarterback play throughout the whole season, very, very poor wide receiver play throughout the whole season, and never once had a very stable running game throughout the season as well. And I'm not saying that there weren't games where the quarterback played good and or the receivers didn't play good or the running backs didn't play good. Obviously, there were games where they did. But quite frankly, as the season went on, many people started to realize that Georgia, if they were going to make it to a national championship or win a national championship, it wasn't going to be because of Carson Beck or Trevor Etienne or any of the receivers on this team. It was going to be because of their defense carrying them to that point, and that's what their defense did practically in the end of the season. They carried them in the SEC championship. They carried them for a majority of the Notre Dame game. Not once were they winning, but they kept them in the game. Now, this brings the question. I mean, what went wrong for our conference champions? And it's simple. There was just way too much time in between their last game and their playoff game. These teams went almost a month without playing. I'm pretty sure, to be exact, it was about around maybe a little more than 3 weeks. So you have a team such as Oregon who hasn't played a real game in 3 weeks, and yet their next game up is against a red hot Ohio State team. We've already seen a lot of people are upset with this format, and to be honest, I think that the best thing that's going to come out of this year's playoffs is just so much learning that can be made and so much changes that could be made just by seeing how the teams performed this year and how the seeding really worked with this year's playoffs. If you were to ask me, I think the issue is just there's too many teams. I don't think any team deserves a bye no matter they go undefeated or not. I mean, in years past, it was the 4-team playoff and all 4 teams played in the first round. You know, and obviously it's a lot less teams, but you could have found a way to make it similar. I feel like 8 teams would have been a perfect amount of teams to have a playoff in. Every team plays in the first round, every team plays in the second round until you get to the national championship. I'm afraid that we're going to see it happen again next year and year after that, where a conference champion, and I mean, it doesn't matter if they are a Big Ten champion or a Big 12 champion. It doesn't matter because Oregon, who was a great team during the season, got absolutely blown out of the water. You're going to see every year the conference champions are going to struggle mightily. Even if they win, they're going to struggle. Or, just like this year, every single one of them is going to get blown out because there's just way too much time in between both games. I think there needs to be a realignment of how many teams make it. I think 8 teams is perfect to make it. And unfortunately, that's not going to happen anytime soon. So get used to seeing conference champions fall every single playoffs. I really think you're going to see teams who make it to their conference championship and purposely lose. For example, Penn State loses their conference championship and gets a very favorable route to the national championship. Having to play SMU and Boise State compared to every other team that's still in is such a favorable route to a national title. So don't be surprised if you see an Alabama team that has 0 losses going against a 1-loss Georgia team, and Alabama loses that game on purpose to get a lower seeding, to get a first-round game. Every single team that's had a first-round game has looked phenomenal in the playoffs so far. But hey, let me know what you guys think. Let me know if there has to be a difference in terms of seeding. Maybe we got the right amount of teams with 12 correct, or should there be less teams in the playoffs? You guys let me know.